So one of the most popular shonens ever, Bleach, has finally come into a conclusion in its last arc, 1,000 Years of Blood War. But what would happen if Ichigo died the fateful night the Hollow attacked him? That's what we're gonna find out today. I hope you guys like the new intro as much as I do. So for you loyal subscribers out there who are asking, DiamondTheft, what are you doing? I'm actually going to do another fan fiction like I did before, which, judging by the views, it did pretty well. And I also wanted to try some anime fan fictions on my channel. That's why today we're reading one from the show Bleach, which ended a couple days ago in the manga. The anime ended a while back, but we don't know if continue the anime with this final arc. Today we're reading The Day I Died by onxyton. What would happen if Ichigo died the fateful night the Hollow attacked him? So we're gonna go all the way back to the first chapter, the first time Ichigo saw a Hollow. What happens if he died? We don't know. It's gonna change the entire story. This is a great time to do this, I guess, because the show ended. What would happen if he never ever made it to like be so powerful and strong in the beginning? Alright, Day I Died, the first chapter, Death of a Strawberry. What is this chain? Thought Ichigo as he stood frozen. Next to him was his body, squeezed to death by a Hollow. Remembering the scene was quite frightening, as it happened in less than a moment ago. Ichigo was in his room, slightly biding his time, reading some magazine Tatsuki gave him, when all of a sudden his room collapsed, and he got caught by a massive Hollow. It shrieked, deafening, and its strength of a couple magnitudes bigger than the strongest living man. The monster held Ichigo tightly, as it slowly moved close to devour Ichigo, only to be stopped by a woman clad in black, her blade wounding the monster, making it no less angry. The monster turned towards the woman, now in a fighting stance, and charged towards her. The monster's speed caught her off guard as she was launched several blocks away, only to crash into a 3-story building. The monster scoffed at the presumable woman. She was dead. It turned its attention back to Ichigo, gripping his already numb body and squeezing his body. Coughing out blood, Ichigo glared at the monster. Is this really how I'm going to end up? Squashed like an ant? He wasn't able to finish his thought, as his mind went blank, and all he felt was emptiness. It was dark and cold. He couldn't breathe. His eyes shot wide open when he realized that he was in fact underwater. He tried to swim to the surface. Looking up to the light must be the surface, and it must be a safe place, he thought, only to notice that he was in fact not moving, still in the same spot as earlier. His thoughts went blank again, leaving him unconscious. He was soon awakened to the real world by the deafening cry of a Hollow, the one that squeezed the life out of him. Ichigo opens his eyes only to notice that he had a chain on his chest. This is the end of the flashback, and now we're going into the real thing. He couldn't comprehend what happened. What was this chain on his chest? Why was it so cold? And why was he still breathing? Ichigo turned towards the cry, surprised that the woman clad in black had defeated the monster. She turned towards Ichigo, slowly walking up to him. His ever-present skull deepened. He eyed the woman in clad carefully. She was short and petite, had short raven hair with a couple of strands hanging between her deep purple eyes. Her face looked like as if she was battle-hardened and ready for anything. She had a skull that almost rivaled his own. Walking up to him, she bowed. "I deeply apologize," was all she said as Ichigo tilted his head, still not comprehending what just happened. "I could not save you in time," she said, while still bowing. "I will accept my berating and any insults you throw at me." Noticing that he hasn't moved even slightly, she lifted her head. His eyes showed no hate or hostility towards her. Raising an eyebrow, she looked at his dumbfounded state. He had a blank stare that showed no emotions, causing her to shiver slightly. Ichigo was stuck in a thought loop. His mind was a mess. Monster, chain on his chest, and a woman dressed as if she's from the past. He was brought back to the real world, with a quick snap of her fingers in front of his face. Pushing aside his thoughts for a second, he looked at the woman, now being in cue to raise his eyebrow. "Who the heck are you?" he asked bluntly, causing a vein to pop out on the woman's forehead. Pushing aside the thought of punching him, She composed herself. I am Rukia Kuchiki, a Shinigami. She looked back to where the now disintegrated hollow was, and that was a hollow. Ichigo slowly nodded, until he noticed what she said. You're the Reaper of Souls? I never thought it would be a woman. He raised his eyebrow as if continuing to eye her. She quickly shot him a glare, as cold as the night. I am not the only one, of course. How could one person keep an eye on every soul? It's ludicrous. There are thousands of Shinigami positioned in the world of the living, and thousands more in the Soul Society. She pointed towards herself with a small smile. But the real question isn't who I am, it is who you are. She looked at him. He was higher than most men she knew, and his hair was obnoxiously orange, making him stick out a lot more than most people. He had amber eyes, and a skull that would definitely rival her brother's. And his attitude is also something else. She mentally nodded to herself. I'm Ichigo Kurosaki, a high school student, he said while scratching his head. He had no idea what to say. He was a high school student, even if it wasn't something as impressive as a Shinigami. She looked at him carefully. I never knew hollows attacked humans, especially someone who should have a little to almost no Ryatsu. Rukia, was it? She got out of her deep thoughts and simply nodded. What is this chain? He said while holding his arm out. On his palm, he had his chain that was still attached to his body, slightly getting heavier as time went by. Still haven't noticed. She tilted her head to the side, her eyes landing on his unconscious body on the floor. Guashu Pomp. It wasn't a pleasant sight whatsoever. Not that she would even express her emotions to anyone. She was a Kuchiki, a royal. She had to present herself as an idol to the next generation of Shinigami. If not her, then who will? Ichigo noticed her eyes, looking at the body on the floor. Body was sort of an exaggeration. It looked more like minced meat with a lot of blood splattered all around. It only hit him a moment later. You're saying? He narrowed his eyesight. That this thing on the floor is the emotions he felt at the moment couldn't be described, even if he tried his hardest. Me? It's confusing. He was squeezed to death, and she bowed and apologized and looked at me weird when I showed her my chain. His eyes widened at the thought of death. Rukia thought he may fall into despair and break before her. Only the opposite happened. Her eyes opened at his grin, his eyes full of hope, void of any doubt, hatred, or despair. Now that was a nice prank. Come on, Keigo. I know you're behind this twisted joke, Ichigo shouted out. He ran and checked every corner and every hiding spot there was, only to stop at the last one. How or who will explain this to Karin and Yuzu? His voice no longer filled with hope, cracking at the names of his sister. He turned to face Rukia. Tell me, Shinigami, what do I do now? He shouted at her, his eyes full of doubt. His mind was filled with nothing but fear. He walked up to her, grabbing both her shoulders and looking straight into her violet eye. Help me, Rukia! His voice was soft this time. He hoped that she knew what to do. After all, she was a Shinigami. If anyone, she would know what to do now. She knew that he will eventually find what he had to do. But right now, it was time to send him to the Soul Society. There is no point. He will forget as soon as he enters Soul Society. I'm going to send you to Soul Society where all other souls are. The pain she felt was something she hasn't felt for a while now. Because her lack in strength, a poor high school student's life is ruined and over because of my lack in strength. As she thought, it stung her heart. Now be still. I will now perform Kansu. It will judge your soul, and you should be forth. We will be sent to the Soul Society. If not, she looked away as she said the latter in a grim manner. She placed the hilt of her zanpakuto on his forehead, only to be sent back several feet by the amount of Ryatsu that exploded from Ichigo. The cloud of dust erupted in the area, and the force behind his Ryatsu was faltering. It was a constant barrage of Ryatsu, wild Ryatsu. Rukia's eyes widened. This unkept and wild Ryatsu, sealed inside a high school student? It was a huge shock to her. The force behind the push kept her away from Ichigo, and his wild Ryatsu kept her at bay as her breathing became harder by the second. She saw a bright blue light emitted by the high school student's body. It was so bright that she couldn't swarm. It turned night into day. The glow went on for some time until it began fading, getting dimmer by the second, his Ryatsu getting lowered as well. The glow completely faded, allowing Rukia to breathe normally and move. She made her way to Ichigo, who was slowly fading into thin air. You were judged worthy of Soul Society. Rukia gave him a small smile. What's going to happen now? He tilted his head slightly, still confused. What just happened? You are going to appear again in the outer regions of Soul Society. If you still remember anything after you appear, make sure to come to Serite. After all, your powers seem quite adequate. She smiled as if she was trying to comprehend what she just said. Just find the White Tower. He simply nodded, noticing his whole body almost faded. If you're really positioned in this city, could you please look after my sisters while I'm gone? Rukia nodded. I will check on them when I have time. To which Ichigo sighed in relief and smiled softly. He disappeared only a moment after, leaving only a teeny tiny trace of his Ryatsu. So, you guys tell me if you enjoyed this story. It took me a long time to read and a lot of editing because I really messed up a lot. I mispronounce words and I still probably miss around some words that I'm just going to keep in there. Leave me some feedback, like the video, share it, subscribe if you're new, and enjoy the new outro that I have. I'll see you guys later. Peace.